Hi, I'm Stephen Bischoff with the Ohio Young Birders Club, and I'm here with Allen Chartier.
Hi Stephen, it's nice to be with you.
So, starting off, were hummingbirds your hook bird? And if not, what bird species got you interested in this career?
Not really. I got interested in birding when I was 8 or 9 years old. I really count my birding start when I was about 11, when I got my first pair of binoculars and bird book. But I remember walking to get registered for first grade down the street with my mother and looking at the cardinals. So probably the cardinal is the first bird I remember. And so I've always been interested in colorful things. I got interested in hummingbirds, especially the research on them, probably when I was in my late 20s. So I've been birding, 15 years by then.
Have you had many birds that have been banded and then recaptured a distance away?
Not a lot. I band songbirds as well as hummingbirds. And so at the station I work at in Michigan, banded my 20,000th bird there since 2004. Roughly, I've had other people start helping me starting in 2007 with hummingbirds, so we're up to 10,000 ruby throats in Michigan. Generally, the recapture rate on songbirds is about 1 in 1,000. And for hummingbirds, it's probably 1 in 2,000 or 1 in 3,000. So out of those, if you're looking at hummingbirds in particular, I've had 2 ruby throats that were caught elsewhere. One of them was in Arkansas and one of them was in Texas.
What type of information has been gained by banding that could not have been gained otherwise?
Oh gosh, all kinds of things. If you look at a lot of migration maps that they show you, the flyways, the Pacific Flyway, the Central Flyway, the Eastern Flyway, that was all worked out from banding ducks, basically, over 100 years ago, 150 years ago. It turns out that some of our songbirds don't follow those flyways, but those are kind of the standards. Like we have warblers, like Tennessee warblers, that go from Michigan to Texas and around, so they kind of cut across a couple of flyways. So migratory routes is one major thing that gets worked out with banding. Longevity, how long do they live, is another, which is important for conservation because you need to know, are these birds going to live long enough to replace themselves and maintain the population? If they only live 2 or 3 years and they only had 1 or 2 young, that's a whole lot different than if they live 10 years and they have 5 or 6 young each year. So we're putting more young out there. So we're also studying molt, their molt in greater detail. And then of course with the rarities that show up, we're kind of documenting the wanderings of some of these birds, like the rufous hummingbirds that show up. Eastern hummingbirds had just come to light since 1970 or so, and the number has exploded, but it's probably more because we're studying them than a big increase. So,
what kind of training is required to band hummingbirds?
Quite a lot of training. I was a songbird bander for about 10 years before I was trained to band hummingbirds. Before I became a songbird bander, I helped a bander for about 10 years before that. So I've actually been handling birds for about 35 years. In order to get a permit to band songbirds, you have to have a valid research plan. You have to submit it to Fish and Wildlife to get a permit. You have to have 2 or 3 ornithologists co-sign for you. Your research plan has to include reasons why you have to catch birds and band them, to study what you're studying, what questions are you trying to answer. After you become a songbird bander, then there's some additional training that you need for hummingbird banding, and it's a lot to do with how small they are and how delicate they appear to be. Banding is one of these apprenticeship kind of things. You have to learn from another bander. So, if you want to be a bird bander, you need to get out with one who already is banding, and they teach you what to do, and it's up to you to stick with it.
How long does it take to band songbirds compared to hummingbirds?
When I'm at my station on Lake St. Clair, I'm banding songbirds, and I've caught 280 birds in a day, which is the most I've ever done. And when I'm doing that, I'm banding a bird a minute. So, getting the birds out of the bag, putting the band on, aging, sexing, measuring, weighing, examining fat, and releasing. So, a bird a minute. Pretty much all day long is how that has to go. When it's a little bit slower, you still spend 2 or 3 minutes because you're trying to keep the birds processed and moving, because the less time you hold them, the less stress there is on the bird. Flycatchers, impinax flycatchers, I can only do an impinax flycatcher in about 8 minutes because of all the measuring of the wing feathers that I have to do to identify willow from alder flycatcher. And then when I do rufous hummingbirds here, I think I've got it down to about 12 minutes. because a ruby throat is real easy to do, but the rufous hummingbirds and Allen's hummingbirds are so similar. There are very critical measurements that have to be taken, and so it takes about 12 minutes. And photo documentation and the whole deal comes with rufous hummingbirds, which is not a part of ruby throats. So,
What would your advice be to youth who are interested in starting banding?
I would suggest to not focus on banding per se. It's certainly an enjoyable thing to do, and it's a valuable tool for learning about birds, but you need to have a project and a purpose to do that first. If somebody is really interested, you can certainly get a lot of hands-on experience and learn a lot about plumages and molt by seeing the birds up close. So number one recommendation would be just to hook up with a bird bander or a banding station, and we're all looking for volunteers to help out. My station starts in early April, and we've got to carry 14 sets of net poles out into the mud and set them up and take them down and it's a lot of physical work. But then the reward is you get to see the birds up close, and some people are just satisfied with helping to that level, and some would like to become bird banders, and I have trained several bird banders and hummingbird banders. Not everyone wants to go to that level, but like I say, it's an apprenticeship kind of thing. So
if somebody wanted to go to a place in the United States to see hummingbirds, where would you recommend?
Oh, definitely southeastern Arizona. That's the diversity spot. I think there's 14 or 15 species that have occurred there. And the prime time is actually during the monsoon season in July and August. We had a pretty good time there when we went in May one year, but July and August is really the best time, and it's cooler up in the mountains, and there's a little bit of rain now and then, but that's when a lot of the species move north from Mexico. It's the best time to see white-ears and violet crowns and some of the other rarities. The barreline comes north at that time too, and there's in late July and early August, the rufous hummingbirds and the Allen's hummingbirds are starting to migrate in, and you've got Annas. So I mean, you can sit at a feeder at some of these lodges and have 200 hummingbirds just buzzing around you. It's just fantastic.
When you were a boy or a teen, did you think this would be your career?
When I was really younger, 8, 9, 10 years old, I was just interested in nature. I had an uncle who was a bird watcher, and he used to tell me his World War II stories about the birds he saw in the Philippines and the Moluccas and New Guinea, and it was just an amazing thing for a young kid to hear. Yeah, well, in addition to my really rabid interest in birds, I have a strong interest in reptiles and amphibians and beetles and butterflies and mammals and all kinds of things. So that I was always interested in all these things, and that's why zoology was really the thing for me. But birds are birds, and they just really attract a lot of attention, and even people who end up being entomologists end up having some interest in birds. So
what do you like most about your research?
The data is really interesting as it comes in, and looking at birds that have moved around here and there. I'll talk a little bit more about some of these movements, but we have had some birds move around in Michigan like 10, 15, 20 miles, come to different places, and it's good to see how many birds come back from one year to the next. And so the data itself is probably the most interesting part. And handling the birds is certainly a privilege. It's always a joy. Science is serious stuff, but nobody says you can't have fun at it.
Thank you for your time, Mr. Chartier. I'm looking forward to watching your presentation tonight.
Thanks for having me. It was nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.